board, and that's
Hey, buddy.
and that would be awesome.
Circulate these around the room. I didn't get any pins, but if everyone could sign in, and I never want to leave without a prayer request as well. So I'll just kind of get these going around, starting back here. What, Kevin?
Well, about half an hour ago, Randy just shared with me what he wanted me to talk about. So I came here thinking we were going to talk about sports, and stuff like that. So actually, we drove out here from Phoenix, and this morning I drove up to Randy's house, and I got out of the car, and he's standing on the porch, and he looks at me, and he said, Johnny Cash left town. So, okay. Is there another set of clothes I can wear? We went to Folsom today to, just kind of tour that and check out what's going on here locally. Okay, one thing before I get started. This is an elective class, and if you get bored and you don't like it, there's an automotive class right next door in there. You could slip into there. I'm going to be kind of stuck to these notes a little bit because it's more for your sake than mine, because I can ramble, and this will help me try and keep things to where they could be relevant. But what I want to do is just start out by painting a little bit of a picture for you of what the national epidemic is that we're faced with. The problem with incarceration today in this country is so huge that the White House has appointed a task force to study this and to try and come up with solutions. And so far, the best solutions they've had for this is appeal to the faith-based community. The faith-based community seems to be the only entity in this country that could help with our problem of incarceration.
Now they're getting it.
Yeah, and you know what? There is amazing results from that too. You talk about the things that are happening in Angola, the largest maximum security prison in the United States. It's absolutely amazing when you get a warden who brings Jesus into the picture.
Amen.
Yeah.
Without any apologies.
No.
And just throws it in your face, throws it out there and says, without Jesus, we're not going to change these men.
Amen.
Right.
And the results are, you can't argue against them.
No.
You would think that, you know what, the ACLU would be all over that. There's no way he could get away with that kind of stuff. And the truth of the matter is the ACLU absolutely loves Warden Burl Cain in Angola prison, because you cannot argue with the results.
No.
And the ACLU won't go near that. They won't touch it. They love it. They actually do things together, the warden and the ACLU, and he doesn't agree with them and a lot of their agendas and stuff, but why fight them if they're going to get into your camp and help support it? And that's the thing that's happening. I mention this because, see, we have a problem in this country with how we have viewed incarceration. And in custody circles all over this country, there are many people who have made careers out of this that absolutely hate this man. Because what he's done is he's opened the box. And he showed that our approach has done nothing but exacerbated the problem. It's made the problem worse. If you got a dog that bites, what happens if you take that dog and you isolate him, and you kick him, and you put him in a cell, and you don't give him any kind of attention or affirmation? What do you think happens to that dog? Guys, we're the same. The exact same thing happens to us if you take us and you strip us from dignity. You take away respect. You treat us in a way that's at some levels inhumane, and then you put us into that position, and the problem is that you're reinforcing all of those negative things that brought you there to begin with. Not only are you reinforcing it, you're actually cultivating it now. You're trying to make that grow. And what's happened in our country is just astronomical. We are the #1 incarceration country in the world per capita. And guys, every other nation out there knows that. And we have to answer to that. We have to answer to the rest of the world for this social problem that we have and the way that we have dealt with this problem. You know, it's interesting that in the incarcerated community, a very high percentage of those who are incarcerated in prison are given a mental health label and put on prescription medications for mental health issues. And you know, in some cases, the reason for that is because it's easier to drug a person to help him with his anxieties and the stress and all of these kinds of things that he's facing. It's easier to do that than to really deal with the problem. So in some cases, that's what it is. But in a lot of cases, it's legitimate. Our people in prison have mental health issues. And see, we don't deal with that well in this country. We don't deal with these kind of social stigmas like that well in this country. And so a person who fits that category doesn't get that kind of affirmation and that kind of social support, generally speaking, in our society. And so you're going to find him going to those negative behaviors and doing criminal activities and antisocial type things like that. But if we could just deal with the root of the problem, now as Christians we know what the root of the problem is. But even in just simply a social understanding of it, if we could just deal with the roots of the problems and how did we get here to begin with, we would turn this thing around. We would completely change the whole mentality, the philosophy, the way that we look at incarceration in this country. Because right now it's punitive. It's not rehabilitation. We use that label. You'll hear the term rehabilitation a lot, but there's almost nothing we do in the prison systems in this country that you would call rehabilitation. Whatever it is that we do call that, it ain't working. We're not doing that well. We're not rehabilitating. What we are is we're punishing. And listen, there are people who belong in prison. That's just a fact. There are mean people out there. There are immoral people out there. There are people who have committed horrendous crimes. And they belong in prison. But if what we did in prison is we isolated those people into their categories and then we dealt with them where they were at and we started looking at root causes and issues and what got them to that place to begin with, then we could start working with them. The thing about Angola prison, that warden proved something that people in corrections had been denying for decades, if not centuries. And that is that men and women can be rehabilitated. That can change. And it's changing in an amazing way down in that prison. And see, in this country, all of the rest of corrections has to answer to that. So my experience predominantly is in the state of Arizona. And so I'm going to read to you some statistics here. And when I get to Arizona, you got to kind of fit that into perspective. Because in California, your population is so much higher than Arizona. So when you think of per capita terms, then it does paint a pretty bad picture. But if you just go by hard numbers, if you compared it to California, I mean, you got close to 140,000 inmates in prison. Here in Arizona, or California, we have 40,000 inmates in prison. But that's per capita. And if you compared populations, we actually have a worse problem than you do in Arizona. So I'm going to read off of this just because I want you to hear these statistics. It paints a picture. In 2006, 650,000 prisoners were released from state prisons alone all over this country and the United States. That's in a one-year period of time, 650,000 inmates released from prison. That's a lot of people released from prison, and if they're not properly prepared, you just think about it, they're moving into a neighborhood near you. And if they're not acclimating into a reentry system, we got a big problem on our hands. In 2008, the Pew Center report did a study, said that 1 in 31 adults in the United States are incarcerated on parole or on probation. 1 in 31?
Wow.
Americans, they're either incarcerated on parole or on probation. I mean, tell me we don't have a problem. 1 in 100 American adults are incarcerated. 1.7 million children in the United States have a parent who is in prison. And what that does is that makes every one of those children 5 to 7 times more likely to go to prison themselves. See, this problem is passed on from generation to generation. And in this country, we have a situation where parents are meeting their children in prison, and vice versa. You have children and parents who have never met each other before. Men in prison that had a child and never met him, never knew him, and they meet him in prison as adults for the first time. That's happening all over this country. The United States, I already told you, has the highest incarceration rate per capita than any other nation. Our national recidivism rate is hovering around 82%. And recidivism, I'm sure most people here know what that means, but that's just going back to prison. Usually it's tracked over a 3-year period of time. So you think about it, someone coming out of prison tracked over a 3-year period of time, 82% of those that we release from prison in this country are going back somewhere in that 3-year period of time. Now in Arizona, we have about a 67 to 70% recidivism rate, and we are the second fastest growing incarceration state in the nation per capita. I'm going to let you guess at what the first fastest growing is.
Correctional
Huh?
officers.
No. And I probably didn't say that well. Our state, our incarceration rate is growing the second fastest of any other state in the nation per capita. In other words, we're increasing fast on how many inmates we have in prison. You know what the first fastest state is?
New York.
California, probably.
You know what, if you're not from California, most people say California.
Texas.
You're not going to believe this. It's Montana.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Per capita.
Yeah, I know.
You're 5 in jail one night, you're gonna win.
There's only 16 people that live in the whole state. If somebody goes to prison, you know, they win. So yeah, I mean, you got 33. I thought you just told me today you had 34 prisons here.
Not including fire camps, private prisons,
Okay.
return to custodies, and federal and youth authority.
Wow. Yeah, California Youth Authority. I almost went there. We have 10 state prison complexes in Arizona and 5 private prisons that we contract to. That's a lot for us. We're a small state compared to California, and so our prison complexes are all over the state. Jenny and I, we go into all prisons in the state, but your cost per inmate here, I'm not sure what it is here, but in fiscal year 2010 for us, the average daily cost of an inmate in prison was $61.39.
72 here in California.
Okay, that's
Is that
cost
per
of
day?
living.
Yeah, so it's like 35 grand a year?
Yeah, that 35 grand. That's probably a little high for 72 a day. But yeah, the point is it's expensive. It's a big problem. You know, when you think about this, and we're paying this kind of money every single year. Some of the things that Randy had shared with me that he was really impacted by when he came and visited what we're doing in Arizona is, here's what we do, and I really think California, from the exposure that I've had so far, I really think California fits this camp just as well too. But what we do in incarceration is we release men and women into crises. we release them in a way that it almost guarantees that they're going to go back. You know, in some cases, some places we offer patronizing type programs that we call reentry programs. And some of these things, while well-meaning, most of the time it's just somebody in the education field with the prison is being paid to teach this class. It's a program, it's a class, and it doesn't most of the time it's not really reaching the heart, and it isn't connecting the dots, and it isn't really relevant to what they're going to face when they get out. So what we do is we release men and women in a way that is completely unprepared for what they're going to face when they get out. I mean, you think about it, how many of you have been on short-term mission trips with your church to another third world country? I see, when you went there, you went to an entirely different culture than what you were familiar with. But when you went there, you had a safety net built around you. And there was a lot of preparation that went into place. You have a host group down there that you could be confident in is going to take care of your needs. The logistics were all taken care of. And, you know, you were only going to get so close to the real culture when you were down there, but there was always this safety net around you. And you knew that in a week or 10 days or 2 weeks, whatever your time frame was, you were going to go back home and everything was going to go back to business as usual.
You obviously didn't ride our bus.
Well, we need to take you on a short-term mission trip to prison for 7 years. That'll change the
7 years?
perspective. See, what happens when you go to prison is that, and jail fits this setting too, but when you go to prison, what happens is you immediately lose your identity. See, you were somebody out here. And your identity was wrapped up in something. It was your church group, your faith group, your career, your work, your home, your family. You had an identity, a label that you carried with you. And you immediately drop that, you lose that, and you're setting the hardest time, at least for me in all of my memories. I was a juvenile all the times I got locked up. But in my memories, the hardest time was that first time when you're told, turn around, put your hands behind your back. And you're put into the back seat of this car that has a cage all around it, and you look out through that grid, and you see out there, and everything you could possibly love, everything you cherish, is on the other side of that window now, and you can't touch it. It's taken from you. Whatever you love is gone. Whatever gives you affirmation, it's gone. And you suddenly get drop-shipped into this culture that doesn't like you. It's not nice. There isn't anybody there that's going to open their arms to you. Nobody's going to give you friendly hugs. If they give you a hug, it ain't the kind you want to receive. You know, it ain't that kind. And so it is just like being put in a helicopter, flown over a foreign culture, and dropped out of that helicopter, and the helicopter flies off. And you're left there to fend for yourself. Guys, prison is a subculture. It's a whole different world. There are some here, I'm sure, who have been incarcerated. This is a place that you better learn how to play by their rules. You got to learn how to survive in this culture. You got to learn what the rules are. And there's similarities to prisons all over the nation, and then there's differences in prisons. So I can speak about Arizona prisons. That's where I go into. But when you first get to a prison yard, the head of the race calls for your paperwork, and you got to show him all your court papers. And he's going to read over all those paperwork, and he's going to decide whether or not they're going to accept you. Every single race has a head of the race, and he calls the shots for how that yard's going to be run. And you better do what he says to do. You work in the kitchen, you better be stealing potatoes. You better be stealing whatever he wants you to steal. You work in the store, you better be bringing back to your race whatever he said you're going to bring back. You take a stand and say, no, I'm not in that, I don't want to do that. Well, you take that stand at your own risk. You will function in this culture. You no longer wear the clothes you're wearing here today. You're going to wear the outfit that every other man in there is wearing. In Arizona, it's orange. Here, it's blue. You're going to dress alike. You're going to think alike. You're going to act alike. Today you make 4,500 decisions a day. I don't know how they come up with those kind of things. Follow you around and right every time they see you make a decision. But you and I, we make about 4,500 decisions a day. An inmate makes 400 decisions a day. And you don't realize the skill that goes into that logic, that processing, that cognitive ability that you have. You learn that. You were trained in that, but you didn't realize that. You didn't recognize it. It just came to you. But it's a skill that you learn to do. You take away the ability to make decisions, and you start losing that skill. You see, an inmate, he's told when to get up, when to go down, sometimes when to shower, when lights are going out, when they're turning on, when you're going to eat, when you're going to get up from the table and leave. You're done eating, get out of here. An inmate, all of his decisions are basically made for him. And now he has become entitled. He's living in an entitlement system where he doesn't have to earn things. His job is kind of a farce in a sense. It's not a real job. You work outside here like you work in prison, you're not going to get paid well. You're going to get fired. Okay? The way that they work in prison and the way you work on outside, it's two different environments, two different worlds. I've taken many guys out to lunch, picking them up out of prison. Somebody's going to break my track record on this one someday. But so far, not one guy has been able to order off of the menu that I picked up. And sure, there could be some guys that are just being nice and, you know. But I'll tell you what I see time and time again. The sweat starts, you know, the agitation. When they come into the restaurant, there's all this chaos and noise around and the people and everything. And you can see the nervousness and you can see them getting rigid and everything. And they sit down and they're looking around and all of this. And you know, it's fight or flight. They're ready to do something, spring into action. They don't know what to do. They sit down and they're just stressed. And a waitress comes, hands them a menu, and they tear at this. I've seen guys break down and cry when they see a menu. The server comes up and asks, "What do you want to drink?" And you know, I'll usually just wait for a few seconds to give them an opportunity. Not one guy has ever been able to figure out what to order to drink. So I'll say whatever I want, and then they'll say, "That sounds good, I'll have that." And then when they come to get the order for food, you know, I could order liver and onions. I can't stand liver and onions. They do the same thing. Whatever I order, they're going to say, "That sounds good, that's what I want, I'll get that." Yeah. I've seen guys when you were talking about going in the back of the room and having to wipe your eyes at the graduation. I hate that. I have to deal with this all the time. I've seen guys just completely break down in public settings. I've seen guys go into a grocery store and look around and just completely lose it looking at the fruits and vegetables. Just seeing the selection there and the choices that are in front of them. I was with a guy, he was a Mexican guy, and race is everything in prison. So he was a Mexican guy. This was a bad dude. I mean, in his day, he was a bad dude. He was a big guy. He killed outside of prison. He killed in prison. He was down for a lot of years. And he got out, he came into our program, went into a food store, a grocery store. And this is one rough-looking guy. He just breaks down and completely loses it. It's kind of embarrassing, actually. What do I do with this guy here? It's when you come out of prison, you cannot step over a line, a property line, the prison gate. You can't just walk out that system and all of a sudden you become who you were before. See, time stood still. When you went to prison, time stood still. It stopped. But time keeps going on out here. Your loved ones out here, if they're still willing to talk to you, your loved ones out here, life has moved on. Even the ones that are willing to come in and visit you or write you or receive phone calls from you, life has still gone on. You've had to get on without that person in your life, and things have changed for you. And when they get out, they're stepping right back, and they're anticipating that life is going to be right in that same place that they stepped out of. And it's not. There's a lot of stress that comes into an inmate coming out of prison if he goes back with his family. You're that inmate, you're a burden. You got to know that. You cost them money that they weren't having to pay. Somebody had to give up a room for you to sleep in now. You're inconveniencing your family when you come out there, and it creates stress, it creates anxiety in the family. And they don't understand your bizarre behaviors. Why would you sit in the room and just, come out? Why, dinner's made, what do you wait? Well, nobody called me to dinner. Get out there, going out, go to the store. I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to leave the property.